Welcome pre-cal students to this video class today. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're ready to learn some math today. Today we will be looking at how to factor a four-term polynomial function. I'd like you to write this heading in your notes if you would please. Your heading today for this video is factoring four-term polynomial functions. Factoring four-term polynomial functions, and be sure to go ahead and write today's date right here with your heading. Now, understand that this video is referring to simple four-term polynomial functions. We are just attempting to review the basic types of factoring before we get into pre-cal. Students, it is very important that we can very quickly factor trinomials with a lead coefficient of 1, factoring trinomials that do not have a lead coefficient of 1, factoring binomials that are perfect squares or perfect cubes, and then also with what we're looking at today, factoring four-term polynomial functions. It's real important that we can do this. Okay, students, there are more difficult four-term polynomials than what we're going to look at today. Just today we will be looking at one simple type. Okay, here are the steps for factoring four-term polynomials. Number one, always pull out what is common first. Number two, make sure it is written in standard form. Now students, you need to be taking notes on this and writing this down, okay? And if you need to pause the video, then feel free to do that. Number three, pull out what is common in the first two terms and pull out what is common in the last two terms. And then lastly, step four, factor, okay? Now, these types of four-term polynomials are not too difficult, so we're only going to practice one of these, okay? So take some really good notes on this, and then you'll have some homework, of course, to do to practice these types of problems. Okay, here we go. All right, copy this in your notes if you would, please, and let's factor this four-term polynomial expression. Now, first of all, always pull out what is common first. Now, if you'll look, we have coefficients of 2, 7, 6, and 21. There is no number that we can factor out that goes into all of those numbers evenly. Also notice in this term here I have 3 x's, this term here I have 2, this term here I have 1, but this term here has 0 x's. So I cannot pull out any x's from all the terms. So step 1 is already finished, but always stop and check first, students, and make sure that you can't pull out something that's common. And if you can, be sure and factor out anything that is common. Number two, make sure it is written in standard form, and we've done that. We have 2x cubed, 7x squared, 6x to the first power, and then your constant term here. So it is written in standard form. Now step 3 says pull out what's common in the first two terms. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're going to pull out what's common in the first two terms in just a second here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to block off these last two terms. We really don't want to pay any attention to those, okay? And so we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. We'll put it back up here later, okay? All right, let's go ahead and pull out what's common in your first two terms, okay? Well, I have a 2 and a 7, and nothing goes into 2 and 7 evenly, so I cannot factor any whole numbers out or coefficients. However, notice I have 3 x's here and 2 x's here. Now, there's no way I can pull out 3 x's from both of those terms, but I can factor out 2 x's from both of those terms. So I'm going to go ahead and factor out an x squared. Now when I do that, I'm left here with 2x, and I'm left here with the negative 7. And here's how I knew that. X squared times 2x is 2x cubed, and x squared times negative 7 is negative 7x squared. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at our last two terms. Okay, let's pull out what's common in our last two terms, and here we go. Notice I have a 6 and a 21. Now, by the way, if this 6 was negative right here, then I would pull out a negative number or negative x, whatever I was pulling out. Okay. In this case, though, my 6 is positive, so I will pull out a positive. And notice I have a 6 and a 21. Well, there is something that goes into both of those numbers, and the largest number that goes into both of those numbers, or the largest factor that goes into both of those numbers, is 3. So I'm going to pull a 3 out. Now there is not an x in both terms, so I cannot pull any x's out. However, let's see what I'm left over with. Here I would have a 2x, and here I would have a negative 7. And let me show you why. 3 times 2x is 6x, and 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. And so I have pulled out what's common in the first two terms. I have pulled out what's common in the second two terms. And whenever you do that, if your two parentheses, now listen to me, if your two parentheses do not match, then you just stop and you just cross off all the work that you've done, and you simply write can't be factored. Can't be factored. Okay, but in this case, notice our two parentheses did match, and so because of that, I'm going to now write my matching parentheses one time. Okay, cross those off, and then in my other parentheses, I'm going to write down what I pulled out here, x squared, and what I pulled out here, positive 3. And so in this parentheses I would have x squared plus 3. Now I'm not going to take time and do this. You need to trust me on this. If you take your first parentheses, 2x minus 7, times your second parentheses, x squared plus 3, you will get out your original 4-term polynomial. Okay, so these are pretty simple. I mean, you're pulling out what's common in your first two terms, pulling out what's common in your second two terms, and then if your parentheses match, you then go ahead and you finish factoring it. Okay, you really need to be familiar with these, and you need to be able to factor these very quickly as we get into the pre-cal, the main part of pre-cal. Okay, we don't want to spend time learning how to factor. We just want to review it and make sure we know how to do it now before we really get into the pre-cal information. Okay, all right, hope this video has been a help to you guys.